What's going on, guys? So today I am out here at the Van Lee Beacon. Again, this is a beautiful, beautiful fifth wheel. A lot of people have been asking me my opinion on the acquisition of Tiffin as well as Van Lee by Thor. And I don't really think it's a bad thing. I mean, Thor owns all sorts of really reputable brands, including Airstream. So there's a lot of really high-end brands, and DRV, those are all under the Thor umbrella. They also own a lot of manufacturers of motorhomes and travel trailers and just about everything else. The fact is that typically when Thor acquires a manufacturer, they don't really change the operating style of that manufacturer. Typically the leadership, the manufacturing techniques, all the things that have made the brands successful continue to be in place. The difference really is their purchasing power, their ability to get things at a steeper discount simply because they're buying it in larger quantities, and those larger quantities allow them to negotiate better pricing. So in all, I really think it's going to be a benefit for them, considering the fact that their motorhomes and fifth wheels aren't made in Indiana like most of the industry does. And because of that, the cost of getting parts and supplies to their manufacturing facilities can cost more. So, under the umbrella of Thor, they now have the negotiating power to acquire parts and materials at a lower cost, which I think is going to be good for them. But that's not the point of this video. Let's get on with it. I'll be right back. All right, guys, so we are out here at the Van Lee Beacon. Again, a beautiful, beautiful fifth wheel. This is what I would consider to be on the upper echelon or higher tier of fifth wheels in terms of just about everything: construction, manufacturing, fit and finish, quality, all of that. And they absolutely have a beautiful unit here. Anyways, the point of today's video is to go over some of the features that you generally can optionally have added onto an RV that you're looking at buying, or you can opt to go without. Basically, things like independent suspension versus leaf sprung suspension, 3 ACs versus 2 ACs, generator installed versus no generator, and even some things related to the floor plan that you generally see as upgrade features on some units. So let's kick this off by first looking at the suspension. Keep in mind, this is entirely my opinion, and this doesn't represent everybody out there. Everybody's camping style is a little bit different. Anyways, when you look at suspension, typically you look at RVs that have one of 3 types of suspension. The 2 most common would be leaf sprung and torsion independent suspension, and then the third would be independent suspension utilizing a rubber bushing that acts as the spring. I'm not going to focus on that one because it's very rare that you run across RVs that have that one as an option. But your Airstreams, your Flagstaffs, Rockwoods, R-Pods, things like that will typically come standard with a torsion style suspension system, whereas fifth wheels may have an option to move to that over your standard leaf sprung. In my opinion, this isn't generally an area where I see a huge advantage in spending the extra money. Leaf sprung suspension has been around for a long time. The advancements in technology with the equalizers and giving you a suspension equalizer, plus the ability for you to add a nice suspension equalizer to a leaf sprung suspension system, I think makes a leaf sprung suspension system just fine. In some cases, it makes sense to reinforce it, add extra welds, add extra gussets, support the areas that are going to be supporting the majority of the load, add things like greasable wet bolts and thicker shackle straps. That type of upgrade I think really makes a lot of sense. But do I believe that you need to go to an independent suspension system and spend the money on that? Not necessarily. Does it improve the ride quality marginally? Yes, it does. But you also have to keep in mind you need to tow your rig completely level because you don't get the same type of equalization of weight across your axles as you do with your traditional leaf sprung equalizer setup. So this is definitely one of those areas I don't necessarily think you need to focus on as an upgrade. While we're here, let's talk about disc brakes. If the manufacturer of the trailer you're looking at, whether it's a fifth wheel or travel trailer, gives you an option to upgrade to disc brakes, I would generally recommend you do so. Mainly because the braking ability of disc brakes and their ability to stop more progressively as opposed to just locking up, basically giving you a much more consistent feeling brake system that in many cases can give give you a huge safety margin in terms of stopping power over drum brakes, I would generally recommend upgrading to disc brakes if they're an option. It's a relatively pricey option because it's generally a different axle that they have to install. It may be the same rated axle, but because the hubs are different and everything like that, they'll usually order them with disc brakes already installed. And again, it can cost you a bit more, but it's an area that I would generally recommend as an upgrade if you can afford it. Next would be tires and wheels. So in many cases, you aren't going to have an option to upgrade to a more robust tire and wheel. In some cases, you do have an option of upgrading to a larger axle, wheel, and tire setup. In the case of this Van Lee Beacon, this is a standard rolling setup. These are H-rated tires, 17.5-inch commercial spec wheels on 8,000-pound rated axles. So again, this is the standard setup on this specific unit. On some coaches, now I know Grand Design and several other brands give you the option of going to a higher spec tire and wheel axle setup. I would generally recommend you go with the most robust tire, wheel, and axle setup you can get whenever you're speccing out your trailer. If you don't have the option to do that, they don't give it to you as an option, then I would look in the aftermarket relatively quickly to upgrade to a better tire and wheel setup if you can over what comes on the trailer. In some cases, you don't have to upgrade your wheels, but in most cases, it makes sense to upgrade your tire to a higher load rated tire. And I usually recommend 1 to 2 load ratings higher than what normally comes on your trailer, unless your trailer is equipped with G or H rated tires. If you have anything below a G rated tire on a fifth wheel, I usually recommend going to a G rated tire. On a travel trailer, again, I usually recommend 1 or 2 load ratings higher than what you currently have, unless the tire is a good manufactured tire. Like if it's a Goodyear Endurance, if they put a good quality tire on it from the factory, then you don't necessarily need to do that as quickly or at all. But just keep in mind, typically the tires that come on RVs are pretty low quality, and this is an area that I would generally recommend spending the most money right at the beginning. That way you avoid some of the headaches, later down the road. And there's no guarantee you're not going to have a blowout even on the highest end tires. However, you do lessen the risk, and that's what it comes down to. If you can reduce the chance of it happening, then that means a much better trip and much less likelihood that you're going to have your trip ruined because of a tire failure. Now here's a big one, and this isn't going to be an option for a lot of folks, but it will be for a few manufacturers, and that's going to be a 3-inch thick sidewall. Is it really needed? In my opinion, it is a huge benefit if you plan on staying in areas where it's either extremely cold or extremely hot, you plan on living in your RV full time, and it is just a standard building practice of the RV manufacturer you're looking at. For instance, Van Lee does not offer a 3-inch thick sidewall. This is a 2-inch thick sidewall. When you look at a Redwood, those are also 2-inch thick sidewalls. When you look at a DRV, a Lux, or a Riverstone, it's a 3-inch thick sidewall, and it gives you significantly more foam insulation packed into the sidewall, or a residential batted style fiberglass insulation in there. Is it going to improve your R value? Absolutely, just like it would in your home. Is it something that's needed for 99.9% of RVers out there? No, it's not. Most of the time, you're going to see those in units that are rated for full-time living because the people are going to be living in it full-time. And it's to reduce the power consumption of air conditioners or the amount of fuel used in a furnace. It's to reduce the cost of operating and living in RVs full-time. If you don't live at an RV campground and you're not paying for power based on the kilowatt hour, then it's generally not something you really need to worry about that much. There's a lot of focus whenever you get into the higher-end units on that 3-inch thick sidewall, and it is great specifically for full-timers. It can benefit you if you are just a weekend warrior and you want the inside of your RV to stay cooler longer or to stay hotter longer. Having that extra insulation can definitely help, but for most people out there, it's absolutely not something they need. Now the next one is full body paint. This is typically anywhere between a $9,000 to $12,000 upgrade on an RV. Full body paint versus typical fiberglass is actually a pretty significant upgrade, mainly because whenever you get a good quality full body paint job, it's usually never going to fade, or it's not going to have problems with the sidewall itself ever looking dingy. It's going to last much, much longer than your typical gel coat fiberglass sidewall. But that being said, most people generally don't own their RVs so long that they worry about that. Full body paint is one of those preferences things. If you want it, if you love the way it looks, and you don't mind paying the extra $8,000 to $12,000 for it, then by all means get it. It absolutely dresses up the RVs, makes them look beautiful, and makes the exterior look better for a much longer period of time. But that being said, eventually everything's going to fade, everything's going to peel or get damaged over time. You're just going to have a much better experience for a longer period of time with full body paint. Next on the list is auto leveling. And for those of you who have watched my channel for a long period of time, you'll know that my opinion has kind of shifted when it comes to auto leveling. When we first got our Coachman, we really didn't think we needed it. It wasn't something that was mandatory for us to have. But by the time we sold our Coachman Chaparral, we wish we had had it, simply because it makes the process of getting set up so much more convenient. You're not rolling forward, rolling backward, checking to see if you're level, having to move it, disconnect, connect, all these different things that kind of go into leveling an RV whenever you're not 100% sure what the terrain looks like that you'll be parking it on. Auto leveling systems work out really great, and they're becoming more and more available as options on travel trailers and fifth wheels. You're starting to see them on units that you never saw them before on, in a price range that is much more appealing. If you can get it, I generally recommend you get it. Hydraulic versus electric is really going to come down to the manufacturer. Some manufacturers will offer hydraulic leveling only, and some manufacturers will offer electronic leveling only. So again, it comes down to the manufacturer and what they've elected to use on their coach. Hydraulic is much, much faster, and it's generally more powerful. Electronic is more serviceable and much slower, and it usually isn't quite as powerful. But being serviceable can be a huge deal, especially if you have something that breaks and you need to fix it in the field. Now here's a big one, and that's going to be Sidewall Construction in terms of Azdel versus your typical gel coat over a Luan backer. In my opinion, if you can find a coach that is switched to Azdel, that's my preference. I'm a huge fan of Azdel. I'm a huge fan of composite sidewall, simply because you avoid the chance of the backer ever delaminating due to moisture or water damage. And you're starting to see most manufacturers switch to it. Now that being said, whenever you're using like a true gel coat sidewall like this, that's full body paint, this is actually considered to be a premium over Azdel. However, they could still laminate this to Azdel if they wanted to. So you're seeing some manufacturers that are kind of doing both. They're switching to Azdel and they're laminating their fiberglass on top of it and still offering you full body paint, which I think gives you the best of all worlds. It's just a really, really great technique. But as long as this sidewall is built correctly, as long as it's done and laminated in the way that it should be in a humidity controlled environment that is very, very much set up for this, you should never really have a problem with your sidewall. Sidewall issues generally happen when moisture gets in around a window, around maybe the top roofing material, and it gets behind the wall and it starts delaminating the wood from the fiberglass. It's never a good thing when it happens. It's very expensive to repair. So I think the more the industry adopts the use of Azdel in their sidewall construction, I think the better. And I really appreciate an RV that has Azdel in the sidewall. Typically, you'll see a sticker right here near the door that says Azdel Composite Panels. And then finally, we're going to finish with your pin box. Do you need to opt for an upgraded pin box? Well, as you move to your higher end RVs, a lot of times it's just going to come standard. You're not going to have much of a choice. But in some cases, if you plan on getting an RV that has the option for a standard pin box or an upgraded pin box, you know, oftentimes it makes more sense to go for the standard pin box, save yourself the cost, because you may choose to go with a different style of pin box that's more suited to your needs later. You might want to switch to like a Gen Y Executive or a Reese Goose box so you clear the hitch out of the back of your truck. Or you may see a new model of pin box that really controls trucking well that you want to go to. So avoiding the one that they want to upgrade you to and getting one that you want later after you've done your own research on how you plan on towing might be the better option for you. But this is definitely something I don't recommend you need to do when you buy the RV. If you can save the cost and go to a standard pin box, and then take your time and find the one that's going to be best for your specific needs later. So this is part one of a two-part series. Stay tuned for the second video, which will go live real soon. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.